Thank you, Nan. So I'm just going to make a few announcements on upcoming things. First of all, just want to remind everyone again that we have our exhibit coming up. And so that is in October. You'll probably need to have things done around September because they want to put a catalog together. It's all on there. You can click on that. And so that is the in-person exhibit. And we are looking to do a virtual exhibit too for those who aren't local. In a couple weeks, we have Nina Tran, Gothicized Italic. She taught this for us before. I loved it so much. It was several years ago for the Inland Empire. I loved it so much, I asked her to teach it again. And she says she has a new way of writing these letters now also. So that will be interesting because I was really happy with what I did before. I'll be very interested to see what she does differently. And she will include some of the flourishing. She showed this flourishing with Fraktur. I can always use a refresher, and she'll show it this time with Gothicized Italic. She'll be doing stunt Romans, which just look like so much fun, and she'll do that for the Solar Nibs chapter. And that's an inexpensive short mini workshop. Inland Empire. So I've got pictures and all. I just need to put them out here. We have Mina Taylor will be teaching a Mother's Day theme. It will be in person, but we are looking to put it on Zoom so that everybody can participate. And Mina has designed some fun cards. She always has really fun stuff. They'll be we're going to call it for mothers and others, because you don't have to do a Mother's Day card, and you can do a Mother's Day card and then other types of cards. So we'll put the new name up there pretty soon. And then for Inland Empire, Rick Paulus, The Calligrapher's Process. It's about composition, materials, all kinds of things involved with creating pieces. And many of you know Rick Paulus was the head White House calligrapher for many years. He left, and then Pat Blair took over after Rick. Jane Shibata, Mastering Markers, and you can see some more things coming up, italic tune-up, etc. So I'll stop. Well, let me mention one more, Blossoms and Quills with Shreya Verma. We had a conflict with our dates, so we're just working out the dates. Nan is working on that. And then that is going to be Wildflowers and Journaling. And that's where I thought the stunt Romans that Solar Nibs, Nina is doing with Solar Nibs would come in handy, but also Shreya will talk about some lettering, some fun lettering for journaling pages. And that is going to be 3 sessions plus a review session. So you'll get a lot from that. So with that, I'm going to stop the sharing. Okay, thanks all for coming. And I'm just wondering, I want to put this in gallery. I'm going to remove the spotlight and put this in gallery view. How many in this session were in Andrea Wunderlich's recent session, Spark of Gold? So while I loved her letters, and that's one reason I asked her to teach, it was Romans. They were variations on Romans, which I just hadn't given it that much thought. And I just thought everybody was so enthusiastic. We had a lot of signups for that. And I just think that we're all kind of into Romans these days. And Andrea has her own way of teaching. She comes up with a unique slant, and it's always a wonderful way of looking at things. So we'll touch on a few of the things. Just we've done some of these before, press and release with the pen, etc. But it just was a wonderful workshop. And if you ever, we will have her again. So if you ever get a chance to study with Andrea, just consider it carefully. And also, Andrea just was given the prize in Europe, they call it the International Calligraphy Prize, something, a name similar to that. And Andrea was picked for this year, and she does the most beautiful work, murals, just a huge range of work. So that I thought was very well deserved. Okay, anybody have any sharing they want to do before we move on to today's session? Yvonne, you're on mute.
I'm going to switch over to my camera real quick
Okay.
because that'll be the easiest way to show. So this was from Andrea's workshop.
Yeah, and I remember you posted that in Padlet.
Yeah, actually the one I posted was my previous version, and this was the final. And then I made some bookmarks with it, which is always an easy way to practice in a short time without a big time investment. So it was a lot of fun.
It was, and I did an envelope during her class, but I didn't put sufficient thought into my Romans. I just wrote them. I didn't think properly about proportions and all, and they looked pretty ugly, but I thought I will practice some more and I will take into account everything we've been covering in these study group sessions.
Yeah, I thought they were so forgiving because there were ways to play with the layouts, and also these little extra lines. Well, this is pretty faint, but anyways, when you add the extra lines to the layouts, mine are, you can barely see them, but they're real fine. And she was right. That's a good way to make the proportion what you want it to be, or what you hoped it would be.
Yeah, and once you got to the bouncing, etc., they are very forgiving, but I think I did it after the first day, and I did them just straight. And so it was really obvious that my A was too skinny, etc. And also I practiced at a smaller height, and when I did it on the envelope, I did it larger. Well, that's just not advisable to go larger without practicing.
Yeah,
So
these are about I would say 1.25 inches.
yeah,
And so it was
very
good
fun.
stuff. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else have anything to share? When I do the sample that I'm going to be working on, I will have a piece I started for Andrea's. I'll just put it up here. And let me spotlight. Thank you, Nan. So this is mine. It's not done. Andrea gave me a great suggestion. This A is kind of hanging out there, and I took it in Photoshop and I played with moving it around, and I do really like it moved up there. So I am going to move it, but I did this before she made that suggestion, or before I saw it. But this is just going to be my centerpiece for my play sheet today. But I did my letters they're kind of a cross between, we've been playing with the Sherry Thornton letters and Veronica Phillips and Peter Thornton. So I didn't necessarily do Andrea's capitals, which I love those and I want to spend more time with them, but I did a little more, even quirkier on mine.
I love the O's.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. I always do that. So, but that's what we did in that class, and it just was so enjoyable. And she had wonderful practice exercises that just make you want to practice. So let me remove the spotlight. Anybody else have anything? Okay, I don't see anybody. Maybe after we have our
Chris-
session, you'll have,
Christy, I'll just
Uh-huh.
say, I don't know whether people know that the Chicago Calligraphy Collective is hosting Mike Kessick in April. A free presentation. And so if you just go to their website, you don't want to miss Mike Kessick. He's a consummate calligrapher. So just letting everybody know, you can sign
thank
up.
you. What'd you
Yeah.
say the date was?
Wednesday, April the 17th,
Okay, all right. I know when I went to my first conference, I studied the whole week with Mike Kessick. So,
and I
we-
think I did the same too. I signed up for him, but I was a newbie. It was an
I-
interesting experience. Yeah, so it's either April, but yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have the correct
okay,
date. I'll
well,
check.
when people
Yeah.
go out, Chicago Calligraphy Collective, when they go out to the website, they
Yeah.
can see what the date is.
And if
I
you
did
read,
write down the 17th.
yes, okay.
I'm
Great,
pretty sure
thank
it's
you.
17th.
And
Thank
if you
you.
do register and can't make it, they will send you the recording. Anyway,
And let's have another show of hands. I'm sure not that many are going, but how many are going to the Roman Holiday Conference, which is also hosted by Chicago Calligraphy Collective? Okay, it's
I'm
rather,
only signed up for the online portion. I don't know if you want to distinguish between the two.
well, that matters. Those are some great classes. And what a few of us were lamenting was that it's not at a different time so that we can't do both. You have a choice. You do online or you do in person. And they've got some really good online classes and we're going to miss them. So, okay. With that, and I don't know if I would have gone because it is so expensive, but I always add on days with a friend and we go sightseeing ahead of time. And that's half the fun. And in the evenings, we're going to do art together. So that just the conference is great, but also the extracurricular stuff is great. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get on with the lesson then. All right. I sent you a handout. I sent you this, and I'll turn on my camera and get that on there. So this is from Thomas Ingmire. And I think this was from, I think somebody passed away and they had a bunch of handouts and this was in there. And I asked Thomas if I could base a study group on some of his work, and he did give me permission even to mail this out to all of you. So he was very gracious. I have never studied with Thomas. He doesn't teach that much anymore, but he does have correspondence classes if anybody is interested. I never studied with him because I never thought I was up to it. And now that I feel I could take his class and would benefit from it, he's not teaching so much. So, but what I loved about this handout was just the way it's done spontaneously. Different writing. And I thought this is a great way to practice. So this is a handout, but we can do a play sheet. And we have done play sheets in the past. But it's been a while and I thought, well, let's do a Romans play sheet where we just focus on Romans. And that's what this is. There's a little bit that is almost italic, but if you look at them, they're also round like foundational, not really oval, although this one is a little bit oval. So this one's kind of close to italic. And since italic is just really, the capitals especially are slender Romans, I think it'd be just great to put italic on this too. And while I did this size for mine, what I like is he had his largest he put, and then everything else are different sizes. He's got these great open monoline almost. They aren't monoline. If you look at them, they aren't exactly. There are some thicks and thins, but they are close to monoline. Skeleton, look at these, really thin. He's got these that really look a lot like italic, but not, they also look a lot like a cross between foundational and italic. And then he's got small letters here, different sizes, really small here, some mediums. So the one nice thing about these sheets is that you vary the sizes, vary the weights. And Nan, can you do me a favor and make sure everyone's muted except for me? Thanks. All right, so we're going to talk about these, but what I also thought I would do is go over the pen Romans, review them. And I mentioned I kind of had a little near disaster. Claire was in a was hosting a workshop earlier, and we had a near disaster. Well, I had a near disaster here, so I kind of didn't get all my warm up done ahead of time. I mentioned that my camera was used at, I shouldn't say my camera, it's a San Diego's camera. It was used at the Letters California Style Conference. And when I opened it to use it, there's some other cables in there. They aren't the cables that work with this. And it's what the settings were switched, etc. So I worked on that up till the start of this. So I'm not very warmed up and my letters are looking pretty ugly, but I'm sure yours will look much better. And because we did gouache with Andrea, I thought I'm gonna practice with some gouache. And one thing Andreas would say is you should never let your gouache dry out. Well, she's a little late for many of us. Many of our tubes are dry. It's dry in the containers, etc. So mine is reconstituted, but I definitely see the benefit of not letting it dry out. She will go through her kit occasionally and add water, and she shakes up her tubes to spread the glycerin around inside the tube. I had one watercolor teacher that used to buy glycerin in bulk, and she would add it to her paints just to keep them fluid. So those are just things to think about, because I can see some little particles in here that it's not quite as neat. Also, if you wet all this way ahead of time before you're ready to use it, 15 minutes, Andrea did some of hers 30 minutes in advance, it's more likely that those particles will be dissolved, and hopefully it'll work a little better right now. I've got a smaller nib than this one, and this is Mari Nimoy. He was one of our founding members. He's Society for Calligraphy. He was given the title mentor. He taught at, I think it was UCLA, and many of his students were instrumental in founding the Society for Calligraphy 50 years ago. So these are all done with thicker nibs, and his are 8 pen widths. I was just writing with 10 pen widths, but I think I will cut down to 8 like he does. So I'm going to walk through this, and then we will move about, let's say, 7:15, somewhere in there. We'll move to the play sheet and start playing with that. But for now, we're just going to do a very quick review of Romans. So I'm going to do 8 pen widths, and I'm going to just dip this in water to get it fluid and going. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And if the squash gives me too much trouble, although it was writing, just not nicely, if it gives me too much trouble, I may switch over to ink. All right, so I'm just going to go through a couple letters in order. I'm not going to go through them all, and then I will skip around by families. Let me just start with A. So A, and the thing is, we've done skeleton before. Let me draw a skeleton letter. Skeleton A. But when you do it with the pen, you're going to have a little more width on that. I'm not just going to go down flat, or I should say steep. I'm going to put a little width in there. So I'll start at a little bit different angle, and let me blot that before I do that. Okay, and I got a fiber in there. Let me get that out of there. Okay. Start here. And then this one, I want to be really the thicker one. And I'll talk about some of the tips as we go along, not just first thing. And the other thing is I should be blotting this, because you can see it's a little blobby when there's too much gouache on there. And you may be using ink, but let me talk about gouache a little bit. It is great to practice with gouache. It can give you really clean letters. And we were talking about this in our class. So I studied originally with Barbara Close and Lisa Engelbrecht. And Barbara would always say, make your gouache the consistency of half and half. And I would always think, I don't know what the consistency of half and half is. I know it's thicker than milk, but really, what is the consistency? Well, Deanne Singh, I did some tutoring with her, and she said, make it the consistency of ink. And while Andrea didn't exactly agree with that, it worked for me. And so maybe what I should do is qualify. It's a thicker ink. It's not your thin Higgins Eternal. It's a thicker ink, but it's got to be the consistency of ink to flow through the pen. And with Andrea, we did a few little adjustments to make the gouache flow better through our pens, but you don't want it too thick. And that's what I originally did when I first started studying. All my gouache was too thick and all my letters were kind of blobby. So just something to think about. So there's an A. Another thing we can review that we've talked in the past in these study groups is press and release. So here I'm pressing, I'm letting up, so it's a little thinner in the center, and then I'm pressing. And here I'm going across, press, release, press. And sorry, I'm focusing on pressing and releasing, and I got a really bad shaped letter. Okay, and you just don't want to put too much on. I've got too much there. I'm going to move on. Let me do just one more. Put some more ink on so it won't run out like that. Okay, I'm going to talk about the O's. So this one, I'm doing these 8 pen widths high, and this is a Mitchell. I'm kidding. I'm getting gouache all over everything. Mitchell 2.5. So it came to about 4 spaces on my graph paper. So if I do an O, it's going to be the size of that square. I'll do it in here and then I'll do one outside. So we start. And for press and release, your pressing is on the curves. If it's straight, it's at the edges, but if it's a curved letter, it's on the widest part of the letter you press. Okay, let me do one here. Not a perfect O, but that's what warm up and practice will help take care of. And then the C, if I were to do a C, I just wouldn't come all the way to a square. I would stop short of a square. Same with a G. Okay, and a Q, you can just add. And a D would take up, let's put it, I'll do a D. It'll probably be ugly. Ds are not my specialty. Dab that. Okay, so a D is almost a square. And you do want it to be neat. You want your letters to be neater than these. Okay, so if you look at Maury's sheet, the exemplar that I sent out, he has these by types of letters and widths. So at the top are all his circles. The next line 2, he talks about pens that have steeper pen angles on some of the strokes and they have diagonals. So N, let's do an N. So it's steeper. And I'm going to just do this one next, but it's actually not a full square. So, and then come across. Okay, pretty ugly. I probably should work with some ink. Okay, I'm going to do this again, but I just need to warm up with this. Okay. An X. And so you will see at different widths. Different people do these different. I was looking, I think it was Sheila Waters had it about half a square. I've got one, yeah, I've got it a half a square on the exemplar that, no, I don't. I have a 3/4 of a square when I, in the past, have passed out exemplars. So you choose what you want it to be. Okay, so I'm gonna do mine bigger than a square, half a square. Okay. Let's do one more. Feel free, any questions? And don't make your letters look like mine. Make them look like those in the exemplar. They should be, the X should cross above halfway. but not that far across. Not that much higher. Okay. Let's see. Let's go E. That one I will do about a half. And the crossbar sits on top of the line. And R, we're gonna make that one, I'm gonna base that on a half. Let me see what Maury did. Yeah, his was based on half letters. So come around. I usually make it a little bit bigger. Come around. And then when you do your diagonal, it should line up. Let me draw it on here. It should line up about here. So let me do that once more. And you can turn it at the bottom. Okay, and then I'll do M. So M is just barely bigger than a square. Start at the top inside. This is your thin letter. Just come outside. Come down. And start inside and then end outside. Okay, there's your M. Your W, I'm gonna mark that here. Here's your W. It's gonna be one square. So here's a square right here, but the W will be one square on each side. So one little quarter on each side. So we're gonna start up here. And this will be the thicker stroke. Coming from left to right is the thicker stroke. Then we go up. That's our thinner stroke. Down again. Then we want to go up. So the W is bigger than a square. It's the widest letter. Okay, so I think, does anybody have any questions about any letters? I guess I can do an S.
I have a question, Christy. It's
Yes.
Sonia. So I've always been a little bit confused about the press and release. And when you're doing that, should you always be using a pencil? That's what I used to think, because using a pen and ink, I don't see how the press and release works. But you're doing one thick line and one thin line instead of a press and release. Or am I still confused?
No, so
Please
the
help
press
me.
and release is here. Press and release is here. So I'm trying to find a pencil to, here's one. Here's your square. So we do press and release with pencil to start, but you can do it with pen. And I probably shouldn't have done this quite so dark, but that way you can see it. So let me do a straight line, just press and release right here. I'm pressing and then I'm letting up and I'm going to exaggerate. So let me really exaggerate. Press, release, press. Can you see how that's thinner? Does it show?
Yes.
And it's blobby because I didn't blot it. I'm kind of rushing here, but I should do a better job.
But I know when you were showing us with the pencils, you were doing sort of the skeletal letter and then going back over it for the press and release to make it easier, which I personally like because
Well,
the press and release kind of throws me off.
if I were doing my final piece, I'll tell you, when I did this piece, I drew this out as skeletal and I went over it with the pen. But
Yeah.
just for here, for demoing, I'm just doing a quick demo. And
Okay.
so I'm doing, but I'm sure this is pen Romans. And so if you practice all the time, you can do this directly with a pen. But for those of us that don't practice this constantly, we're moving to so many different letters, doing so many different things. It is a nice guide to draw it first in pencil. The only problem with that is, though, when you draw it with pencil, you've got all skeleton lines. When you start adding your thicks and thins, it doesn't necessarily space the same way. So you just have to keep that.
Right.
So what I did was I did this all skeleton letters, press and release. I did it with pencil, press and release.
Mhm.
Then I wrote over it with pen, and then I did it over. I adjusted it.
Mhm.
So, but if we did Romans constantly and we practice constantly, we wouldn't have to do all those steps. But I'd say most of us here, we're doing so many different things that
Mhm.
if you want the guides, I would do them. If I
Yeah.
weren't just demoing right now, I would do them. So here's my W.
Yeah. Mhm. Okay.
Okay, there
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
And now I can do it. But I'm doing the press and release with the pen. And John Stevens, he doesn't necessarily just do press and release. So here's press and release. But then John will actually turn his pen and then turn it back. And actually, I'd say I feel more comfortable with that, but there's different ways to do it. Okay, so
Okay.
for this one, I'm gonna do, these are the heavier ones. I'm gonna go down and I am just doing press and release because we only have an hour and a half tonight.
Yeah.
So I can't be
Okay.
showing all of those things, but
No.
those are your choice.
Right on. Thanks very much.
Uh-huh. And maybe another time we'll go over the turning. So press, let up, press, and I'm running out of ink. And I should dab. And I can press and release here or just do it plain. Okay. And you can see I did skeletons first, but I wasn't really paying attention and I came way down on this one. So let me just do press, come up, press, come up. And all right, so there's the W. I said I'd do an S, and with the S, I usually base it on 2 circles the same size. So here we go. And again, with curves, you press on the curve, and I need to get more gouache in there. Press on the curve. Press. Okay. And I'll touch that up a little. Okay, let me do a better job. Okay. Definitely you need lots of practice with these pen Romans. And it doesn't take that much practice to get up to speed. Just if you come out at this with no warm up and little practice, your letters will look like mine. But a day of practice and they would look good. Any questions about any specific letters? So when you look at Thomas's handout, let me get that. It's here. Let me get this out of the way because it's a little wet. So he is doing some fun stuff. You do whatever you want because this is a play sheet. This is not, this is for you to play around, figure out what you like, and then it's just practice, playing with different techniques, practice. It's not for it to be a finished piece. So here, Thomas took these and he just did some really free form, fun letters. You can see the U on this exemplar. It's got the stroke here and you come over. That's the formal Roman U, but here's this one. And Maury's got a really fun sheet of less formal Romans that's got that U on it too. Look at his Q comes way down. His E is the round E and the S is coming down. So he's bouncing these. They aren't all exactly the same height. Not same height, they don't start at the exact same place. And another thing I'll point out is something that I didn't even take this class with Carl Roars, but somebody else took it with me and mentioned what he had said. You can do your bouncing within a letter. It doesn't have to be one letter and then one's high, one's low, one's high. This M starts here, but look at this center. It doesn't come all the way down. It's shorter. And this stroke here starts higher and ends, if you come across like this, these are not even. So he's bouncing within that letter. So that just adds liveliness to it. This E, it's got the crossbar is diagonal somewhat. You don't want these to be really twisting around. You want them subtle. So if you look at these, they are basically upright, but they lean a little bit. And one is the H. This is lower on the left than it is on the right. Same here. This G tilts back a little. That T, if I had a formal grid, that is slightly, just barely tilted to the right. And these S's, look, the top is bigger than the bottom. This one, the bottom is bigger, but they start higher and they end lower. So he's using his S's as a bigger letter. And one thing with when you bounce like this, you need to take into account the letter before. And eventually you want to think about the letter afterwards too. You could do a rough draft and then you can adjust it. But as you work with this more and we are playing, you might want to think what's next. So let's look at, here's your W. You've got an O coming after it. These look at a pretty, the W is actually lower than the O, but because that, and he made this straighter, but if he had made this W coming out like this, the O could have been lower to fit in there a little better, but he just made his a little straighter so that that O would fit in there better. So these are all things, really, I think his handout here, even though it's the text and the writing is about critiques, studying the letters is a great learning experience. You're just seeing this A is here, the N is lower, and the D is even lower than that. So they aren't just every other letter bouncing up and down. Here's your C, it's the lowest. The R is slightly higher, and the I is slightly higher than that. And that T is, if you look at that, that's barely higher also. And then it starts going back down. And here's this E, and the S just comes around and fits around in this space in the bottom, fills that space. Any questions about that? I think we can start playing with a play sheet now. And while I brought this and I thought I was going to work on this, I think I want to play with some of these kinds of letters. They're a little, they don't have I have just kind of funky, I think fits these letters, where these are a little closer to standard Romans, but they are very informal. They're rounded, bouncing. This O's a little narrower. This O is wide. It's shorter and wide, but this one's a little narrower. So all of this, you can play with that. And so start your play sheet. Do whatever you want. You don't even have to start with this big one. I thought that's easier. Start with that, work around it. You can twist things, but you do
Darcy?
what you, uh-huh.
Before we start playing in our free, could you talk about that underline sheet that Leonard Nimoy has? I'm sorry, Maury Nimoy has.
The guidelines.
Specific in Roman. Yeah, I don't get it. Can
Okay.
you just explain it for a second?
Okay, I just figured
Appreciate
most
it.
people here knew all this, so that's why I didn't go over it. Okay, so here's his guidelines. Here's his baseline. So let me do a W on here, a capital W. I'll do it with pencil. Okay, and then if I were to do a lowercase letter after it, let's say I'm doing a B. So here then, well, you wouldn't have a B after a W, would you? I'm going to do an H. So then here's the baseline. If you're doing formal Romans, they all come to the baseline. And then you come up. And this is the waistline. So we call this the body of the letter of the lower, they aren't really called lowercase, minuscules. It comes up, here's the waistline. The top is here. And it stops at the bottom. Let's say I'm writing which. So then I'd put an I here and the dot would be above. If I'm doing a C, and the spacing's off on that, but you can get the height and the baseline. Is that clear? And so here, this is the capital line.
Mhm.
And in Romans and italic, the ascenders are taller. So actually the H, the top of the H should have gone up to the ascenders line. And if I had a descender, let's do a Y. That comes down to the descenders line. Any questions about that? And so the next line, if I were doing a capital O, which you probably shouldn't do an O because those are harder to draw, but
We're off the baseline, baby.
so that would be the next one. Oops, yeah, thank you. I did mess that up. I made it even harder for myself because it's harder to draw bigger letters. This is the baseline. This is the capital line. Sorry about that. Okay, there. So there's an O. And let's say I'm writing the word over. Then there's the V. And this, if I were writing foundational, then here's the E. Okay. Any other questions about that?
I'd make the observation that his Roman capitals are tall and slender. And because they're 8 pen widths high, where normally, say, Sheila Waters would be 6. So when you look at the O on his sheet, it's a narrower form because it goes with the X heights. It's a narrow Romans.
Okay, so if I measured this, you're probably right. It is. And in fact, well, this is foundational. Yeah. So if you're going to have Trajan Romans, they should be exact squares, but you can do narrower versions. Thank you for pointing that out, Susan.
Makes it more interesting, right?
Yeah. If you go to Italy and look at Romans around the country, you'll find all different kinds of shapes. Any other questions or observations? Okay, so go ahead and we'll play with just start a play sheet, start playing. So you saw my really messy, and I think I'll switch to ink because I'll have better luck with that, but I am trying to practice with my gouache. It's not that hard to do, but you got to have good consistency and practice it. But just start either with your large or start with something on the sheet. Like here's this nice side. And if you want to, do it with pencil and later go on and do it with ink. But remember, this is play. This isn't going to be your finished exhibit piece. This would be where you would get your ideas for what you want to do for an exhibit piece, where you try out techniques and where I practice with my gouache. Maybe you don't normally use Sumi. It'd be a place to try out Sumi ink and grind your own, etc. This is just play sheets are a place to play. And we're using Thomas's handout as an example how to lay it out. And what this reminds me of is Yoka Boden. She does all kinds of pieces where she does them just they aren't planned at all. She just does one and then she figures out where the next one will fit. She's got something small, she'll fit it in a smaller space, and her goal is just to fill up the space she's got. And she might get down to, let's say, down here, and she doesn't have anything to exactly fit that, but then she'll be keeping her eyes open for something. So this is just one. Yoka also does very planned pieces, but some of the fun things she does in her journals are unplanned. They're twisted around. She puts pictures in. That's another thing. If you want to put pictures in, if you want to cut things out of magazines, if you don't draw, cut them out of a magazine. For those who took Andrea's class, we did, it was Spark of Gold. We put gold, different things. We had big gold squares with letters in them. We had small gold. You saw what Yvonne showed with the small gold dots. You can put that kind of stuff in here to, if you have a space. Let's say I had a bigger space here I wanted to fill. I could put a little gold square there, or I could put a colored square. I could just draw a square and color it in with ink or brush it in with watercolor. So you can start with black and white, or you can start with color because color is fun. Okay, so let's just spend a few minutes and play with that, and feel free to make comments as we go along. Let's say we'll work for 15 minutes till 7. Now let's work for 12 minutes till 7:40. Is that 12 minutes? Yes. Thank you. Okay, I guess we're at 7:40 now. And I am trying to be a little neater. I've got to go back. This would not be my first draft, but being a little bit neater with the wash. And I did decide to use that after all, because this paper I'm using, I've noticed it sometimes bleeds with ink. And I've got to go back. It was suggested to use pencil, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna do that on this one because I'm coming up with different letters for this one. I'm kind of looking at what Thomas is doing, and I'm thinking of what Andrea was doing this past week, and I thought I'm gonna try some letters more closer to theirs. I haven't put in, this is a Q, and I'm gonna, I think, make it touch this F. We'll see. But I'm working on it, and this is my first draft. It's a play sheet. It's my first draft. I am bouncing already. And one thing that Andrea did with us is we started with formal Roman letters, and then we would vary them a little, and we did step by step just to get them varied. I think once you've been doing it a while, you don't have to do every single one of those steps, but it's good to keep them in mind. And one thing I didn't mention earlier is it's really nice to not have perfectly straight lines. So if you look at this A, it curves a little. Let's see if I can get it. It curves. It's not perfectly straight. This I has a very subtle curve at the bottom. I've got these curving. I probably, when I write this with a pen, I will curve this K, the first stroke, and I might curve this. So just that's something to add in that you might want to do is curve those. If you look at Thomas's, this is definitely curved. Let's look at some of his others. There's a little, it's very, very subtle, but there is a little wave in that stroke on that H. Let's look at some of his other strokes. These are curved, especially this one, curved on this U. In a formal U, it would be straight. Definitely a curve there, and he moved it over to make it work with the O. And here, he didn't come to a point. He just did a little bit of a jog and a curve. And he's got a curve on his K, and there's a little wave there. So those all add life to these letters. So that's something else I want to point out on these. And you can look at this H, it's lighter up here. It's not as wide. Down here, it's more wide. So he's pressing more there. Any comments, any questions? I probably should have done this with the dark blue just to get the shapes and the rhythm and all before I moved to color, but I just was kind of in the mood to play with color. But now that I'm looking at it, I think I'd like to do the next one in just solid dark color just to get my shapes and bouncing worked out. And I don't like real, I like very subtle bouncing. So this B, I will move it up. I'm not going to have it quite coming down so far. And a lot of these, I may just modify them so they don't bounce so much. Just that's my personal taste. And I'm looking at Thomas's. I do really like his. Those aren't extreme bounces on his. And they have tilting, but they're not extreme. This R is tilting. This H is tilting, but they're just very, very slight. And it gives it life, but it's not all over the place. And everybody's got their own preference. So you do what you want, but I wanted to point those out. Anyone have anything they want to show on what they're working on? just speak up if you, I'm gonna put mine on gallery just so I can see. Any questions, any comments on what you're doing, anything? Okay, here's Terry. I'm gonna spotlight Terry. Okay, wow, you've gotten a lot done.
I really have. I'm kind of excited about this. Just do it, you know?
Yeah, spontaneous. What did she call it? I can't think of the word right now, but just as you go, you are coming up with your design. There's a word for it. I just can't think of it. Maybe somebody else will think of it.
Yeah, I really, really had fun with this. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, and
Maybe spontaneous?
yeah, that wasn't, I mean, that does it and impromptu does it, but I was trying to think of Yoka's word, but I can't think of it at the moment, but I will try to get that. Okay, here's Eugene. Okay, so you've got a lot done. See, everybody moves so much more quickly than I do. You're really going to town. That's great. And you've got your heavy letters, and then you've got your lighter, and you have some metallic in there. And it's just all adds interest. And now what you need to do next, coming up, is do some that are, here, let me do mine. You'll have to do some of these, oh, here. Some of these that go the other way, Eugene.
Yeah.
You've got his that go the same way, but it's really fun to put some of those that go the other way too.
Yeah, I'll just need to find a few more quotes to
Yeah,
fit
yours
in
look
some.
great. It's so and he does tie them together with all those, he's got a lot that go the same way and tie it all together. Just then a few in there, turn the other way. And he doesn't have just one turning the other way. He repeats it. And that's what kind of ties things together. Let me just, it ties things together when you have, let's say, this one and this one are going this way. And maybe this is, and then this one and this one are facing this way. And they're not exactly the same. You're not repeating exactly, but you are repeating elements. And look at this. He's got a and I know some people here in this session do flourishes. Put a flourish here. He's got one at the top, one at the bottom. He's got a little italic flourish down here. That just adds interest. Okay, anyone else have anything? Okay, Jenny, just a minute. And Jenny, you are on mute. And Jenny always gets a lot done.
That looks wonderful.
Yeah.
That looks great. Yeah, good job. That lower letter is a gray. I kind of watered it out.
Yeah, that's great. That's a perfect. Perfect.
And then this one, I'm not good at flourishing like Christy does, but I tried to kind of connect it to this main element.
Well, let's just say I'm out of practice with flourishing, so I'm not so good right now either. So that's great. And you just took that class with Randy, and I can see that influence on that one long line.
Yes, I had to add that in. Oops.
Yeah, and I'm trying to work in some of what I did with Andrea on mine. Okay, anybody else have any comments or now I see Lori's on this call, Lori Paolinetti, now she can flourish. And those are great capitals.
Hi, Christy.
Nice layout on that too.
I just grabbed a pile of parallel pen and I kind of liked the large letters,
Oh, that's a good idea.
On that handout page. So I just tried them, that's all.
That's a great idea to do a parallel pen, especially on a play sheet. What a great, I'm trying to practice my gouache. I really need practice, but parallel pen is a fantastic idea. I'm gonna take that idea. Thank you.
Yeah, it was just a little play. I like the R too, so I did that with like not coming to a point in the center, but you know, that's more of a little curve there. I
Yeah.
like that too.
Yeah, and so if you're using a parallel pen, that's not flexible for press and release, but that's where you can do the twisting to get thinner. But that's just one thing to do at some point. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do everything right now. Anybody else have anything to share? Okay, Annie Lawrence, just a minute. Okay.
I kind of like what Lori just did too. I love that quote that you did too, Lori.
Thank you.
Running things. No, it was Jenny kind of running something along this way. And these were a couple of quotes that I really like. So this is fun, really
Yeah.
fun. Steve.
Great, great.
It's
Thank you
really
for sharing.
fun.
We all know Annie comes
Annie.
up with wonderful stuff. So I look forward to seeing a whole sheet, Annie. So if anybody comes up with a whole sheet, you know, we don't have to put it on Instagram. These are play, but if you have one you want to put in the newsletter just for our members, please feel free to send it. But don't feel obligated. Again, this is play. You're not making, the goal is not to make a finished piece. Anybody else have anything that they'd like to share? Okay, let's see. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to tell you about this. So let me just spotlight and back to the desktop.
Christy, I wanted to ask you, what size do you think the original play sheet was that you've given us as an example?
Well, it's a handout, so I think it's 8.5 by 11.
But his actual initial work when he created it, how big do you think he made it?
I have no clue. You know, I gotta say, Thomas Ingmire is one of the masters. So this could have been done at this size, but you've got a point. These really, really small ones, maybe he wrote them bigger and then reduced them. I don't know. And so he could have done this on a bigger sheet and reduced it. I don't know.
And Christy, do you have the sense that he did it ad hoc as well too?
Yes, I definitely do have that sense. I did not ask him. I wrote to him and asked permission to use this, but I did not ask him a lot of questions. You know, some of these people I know well. I know of Thomas, but I have not studied with him. As I said, I didn't feel I was up to studying with him. And then when I did feel I could get something from it, he's not teaching so much anymore. So I don't really know him. I've seen him, but I don't really know him. So I know his abstract work. I just think he does do things ad hoc. Maybe ad hoc is the word that I was looking for. But I think that that's something he would do, just from what I've heard about him and people I know who have studied with him. And if you know Marina Soria, she was inspired. He's what got her work going. A class with him, she just took off from there. He kept on her, and then at a break, she suddenly had a brainstorm, and then that just opened her whole, just one thing led to another, and wow, what gorgeous work she does. Let's see what else I was going to say about this. Well, so look at these little dots here. Those could be colored little dots, or those could be gold. And in our class with Andrea, we use different things to do gilding, a lot of unexpected things to do gilding. But I'm thinking I've got a bunch of foil that was given to me, and it's made to go with that adhesive. And I thought a play sheet would be the perfect place for me to get out a pen, dip it in some adhesive, and make the little diamonds. And then after it is tacky, just apply the foil. So I'm gonna play with that. I've had this foil sitting around. It was given to me. I just haven't used it, but I want to do that on this play sheet. And so that's what this is for. Try those things you have wanted to try. And you know, you do a flourish, and so you're not flourish isn't that fantastic, but this is a play sheet and it can give you an idea, and then you say, oh, I got to go work on these. Like these. I did better on my, I did better. It's a little messy and I can clean it up with an X-Acto, but I want to redo this anyway. There's some things I don't like, but it's just a start, and then you go and you redo it. It's your experimenting. Any comments before we close? Let me get back to gallery. Any comments, questions? Okay, so our next one, I hope we'll be doing, I will be talking to some more people about possibly presenting. I did ask someone to present in May, but I have not received an answer, so I need to follow up. I do want to get back to ligatures, and I have a friend who went to, was it Sweden or Norway? Anyway, I think it was Norway, and she took pictures of many pieces that had ligatures, and I'd love her to present on that too. So if we will
Christy,
have
on that note, Risa Gettler is speaking on ligatures with the Colorado Guild.
Thank you. What was the date on that again? Because I don't know if I signed up, but you don't, I'm a member, I don't have to sign up. But if you aren't a member, you can still attend. You just need to register so they know how many spots they have to have. Jenny, what's the date of that?
It's April 10th from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. And if you could check the Colorado Calligraphers Guild website, it's $10 for non-members, and it's free for members. And just a FYI, don't mean to say this for SFC platform, but it's only $30 for an annual membership for Colorado Calligraphers Group. So please join us. We're going to have Risa, and also she's going to be talking about ligature. The title is called Kissing and Cuddling.
Yeah, and so when we did our last ligatures, Risa was one I referred to a lot. I took that, what was that class called again? It's been a while. Those letters, Dorothy, what are those letters called?
Visigoth?
Yes, Visigothic versals. And there was so much ligaturing and nesting. That was just the most fun class. And what we did there doesn't necessarily work with Romans, but many of those ligatures would work with Romans. But we will have something in May, and we'll announce it as soon as I find out if somebody's going to present that month or if it'll be a different month. Okay. Anything. So anyway, if you come up with a play sheet you really like, we could put it in the newsletter. It's just us, but don't feel obligated. Again, this is for playing, experimenting, and learning. So with that,
Christy, the piece I'm doing right now, I wrote over the letters with this diluted ink, and it's really a nice transparency that it created. So I'll have letters like overlapping, but
do you want to show it?
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll show on the camera. But,
well, let's just try it.
It's right here.
Yeah, that's nice. I just tried to do that, and it's not easy to get the right dilution.
Can you see
and to
it?
not smear what's underneath too.
Right. but with a pen, it didn't smear and it just added the accent of the letter on top of that black ink.
Great, thank you. So that's what this is for. Playsheets, this is what we experiment here. So if it doesn't work, then you try something else. Great.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thank
Christy.
you. Thank you. So, okay, I guess if nobody else has anything, we will sign off. And I did send out a notice that our finished pieces, what I was doing was translating regular design and art to calligraphy. And I came across the last one and I thought, it doesn't really fit. That the others all fit. The last one didn't fit. And so we have a volunteer to maybe put together another study group where more of the participants present things. So we'll stop with the finished pieces. We may have occasional series, but they won't be every month. And we will look into doing some other groups. The other thing is the San Diego group. This is put on by the San Diego group. And we have no volunteers for treasurer. And if we don't get a treasurer, then I guess that'll be me and we'll hire and pay a bookkeeper, and then I will not be doing workshops, etc. if I have to do treasurer. So, but if anyone would like to do it, it's no problem for us to hire a bookkeeper, but we need a treasurer who will report to the board and has access to write checks. So give it some thought. You don't have to be an expert, and many guilds hire somebody to help out with that. And in fact, our parent group does, they have a bookkeeper who does a lot of the financial work for the chapters and the parents. So give that some thought, because we would love to keep having study groups, etc. But you know, there are only so many hours in the day. Let's see, let me turn this off. Okay, so with that,
Happy National Pencil Day tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
And Easter.
Thank
All
you.
right. Good night,
Thank you.
everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Happy Easter. Happy whatever holiday you celebrate.
And happy
Thanks,
birthday,
Christy.
Christy.
It's
Oh,
Christy's birthday?
Past. It's past.
Happy belated birthday.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.